Hello and welcome to Lichfield. We're right in the centre of the city at Lichfield Cathedral, which is looking particularly glorious now the Christmas trees are lit, ready for the start of Advent. The cathedral dates back to 700 AD and was one of the first in the UK. Today, it is a lively church and a celebrated heritage site. We're in Staffordshire, in the West Midlands, a county of potters, brewers, farmers and innovators. And we have a huge live audience here with us. They've come poised with their questions to put to our panel. We have Graham Stuart, the Conservative MP for Beverley and Holderness, and a Minister for Energy Security and Net Zero. This week, he was one of over a dozen ministers from around the world to call for the phasing out of coal power. He's been an MP since 2005, holding various roles, including Chairman of Parliament's Education Committee and Minister for Europe in the Foreign Office. Graham was born in Carlisle and says his interests range from punk rock to motorcycling to climate change. Jess Phillips is the Labour MP for Birmingham Yardley. Until a fortnight ago, Jess sat on the Labour front benches as the Shadow Minister for Domestic Violence. She resigned from her position to vote for a motion in the Commons which called for a ceasefire in the Israel-Gaza war. Jess grew up in Birmingham and before Parliament she worked for the charity Women's Aid. In 2012, she was appointed Birmingham's first Victims Champion. John Caudwell is a self-made billionaire and a philanthropist. He grew up in Stoke-on-Trent and began selling mobile phones with his brother in the 80s. He went on to found a telecommunications company which included Phones for You. When he sold it in 2006, it was selling 26 phones a minute. At the last election, John donated £500,000 to the Conservative Party, but in September he withdrew his support after the Prime Minister made changes to net zero policies. John's committed to giving at least 70% of his wealth to charitable causes during and after his lifetime. And Jeanette Winterson is an award-winning author and Professor of New Writing at the University of Manchester. Raised in the Lancashire mill town of Accrington, Jeanette studied English literature at Oxford University. Her first book, Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, was published when she was 25 and won the Whitbread Prize. She's gone on to win numerous awards for her work, including a BAFTA, and has been published in 18 countries. She was made a CBE for services to literature in 2018. Lichfield, please welcome your Any Questions panel. So let's get things underway with our first, which comes from Jenny Oram. Hello, Jenny.
Hello. Can we expect COP28, hosted by one of the world's 10 largest oil-producing countries, to deliver meaningful, transformational change?
Jenny, thank you. So COP28, the latest climate summit taking place in Dubai. Can we expect it to deliver meaningful, transformational change? John Caudwell.
Well, I'm not sure that the UAE was the best choice of venues. Will it make any difference? Well, they'll probably sell a bit more oil and do a few more oil deals, and that's a sort of a cynical view. But I do think that when you get all the world leaders together in one venue, it does send a strong message to society. But we do need to do a lot more than just send a strong message, because we are heading, as most people will realise, to an environmental catastrophe. We're already in the foothills of that. We see it all around the world with fires, floods and changes in the environment and the destruction that it has. But it's more serious than that, as we all know, because the polar ice caps are melting at a phenomenal rate. And nobody, even the most critical scientists, really understand what that's going to do, because every time you melt a square metre of ice that reflects 90% of the sun rays, the residual ocean soaks that heat up. But it's even worse than that, because you then release methane gases from under the ice that are trapped, which then exponentializes the effect. So, you know, I don't think there's any doubt that we are on a cataclysmic path. I personally don't believe 2050 is ambitious enough for net zero. And plus the fact there is going to be an overshoot on 1.5 degrees no matter what, unless we really get our acts together. And the current forecast of where we're going at the moment is 3 degrees by the end of the century. Now that, without any doubt, will be devastating if we ever make it to the end of the century. Well, no, I won't, of course, but most of us here won't, but you know, the world won't. And so we are in such a serious state. And are the politicians doing enough? Absolutely not. without any doubt. I mean, look at what we've done now in the UK. And I know a lot of you'll probably agree with the policy of moving 2030 back to 2035 on the... No, well, that's good to see those shaking heads.
This is the sale of new petrol and diesel cars.
I am disgusted that we've moved it back from 2030 to 2035. And the politicking that's gone on around that is atrocious, because the Conservatives, and I am a Conservative, always have been, you've heard I donated, but I call it what it is. And for us to move it back 5 years is an electioneering to try and buy a few votes, because people were saying, where am I going to charge my electric car? Can I afford an electric car? And they were putting all the negatives out.
Okay.
And what about what happens when my boiler goes?
Let me put some of that then to the man we have on the panel, who is of course the Minister responsible for net zero and energy security. You've heard there what John said, Graham. This was electioneering, and he thinks this was about buying votes, not about a commitment to net zero.
Well, we were asked about whether the Dubai COP would make a difference, and I would say it absolutely has to. And of course, I think it is good that it's taking place in Dubai. It opens up, because if you cannot, you've got to bring the whole world together to deal with this challenge, which is, as I agree with everything that John said about setting out what that challenge is. It's worth saying, in the light of John's, what I would suggest is an overreaction to the Prime Minister's announcements in September, because
I'll
let you speak, John. Let me just explain, because
but you've made an outrageous statement there, Graham. So let me just challenge you on that one, and then I'll be quiet. It's not an overstatement. When we set 2030. That's a statement to the world, for the world to follow, to solve this climate crisis, to push the motor manufacturers into electric vehicles, to produce renewable energy at an increasing rapid rate, and get rid of the toxicity of the internal combustion engine, have a clean society and renewable energy. I think it's dreadful, Graham, and I don't know how you can argue against that. It's electioneering.
John, I'd like to get your thoughts on a point that Jeanette made about the fact we'll all need to consume less. We will have to make changes. Do you understand, I suppose, part of the point that Rishi Sunak is arguing, that you have to take people with you if you're going to ask people to make real changes in their lifestyle? And have you made those changes in yours?
Well, first of all, I don't really agree with Jeanette that we have to consume less. What we have to do, if we look at how do we increase our standard of living, this is a definition I came up with 20 years ago, and it's actually, I think, a very good one. We increase our standard of living at the moment by the unsustainable and increasingly efficient exploitation of the Earth's national resources. Now, I know that's a bit of a long-winded statement, but that's just saying that we're just plundering the planet. If we start off with renewable energy, and if we move to sources of materials that are renewable, like, for instance, at the moment there's a lot of research going into the sodium battery. We all know that lithium ion is not here for the long term, because lithium is a very limited commodity. Sodium is everywhere. We can get it out of the seawater. It's amazing. And sodium batteries are on the rise in terms of the technological solution. If we find the right technological solutions, stop plundering the planet, have renewable energy, we can actually have a wonderful situation where we reverse the damage to the planet and increase the living standards, and therefore actually
John,
consume more.
with respect on this, one of the things we've got to consume less of is meat. Because,
I agree.
So when I talk
agree.
about consumption, I mean, I'm thinking about the way that we live in that kind of rather unthinking way. Meat, fast fashion. When we talk, I think we're on the same page in terms of degradation.
Probably are, because meat, the consumption of water to produce a kilogram of meat is 50 times some vegetables. But another one on that is almonds and various other vegetables, but there's a lot of vegetables that can be produced at very, very low water cost.
But we need the story to change, don't we?
We do.
So that people really understand what's being asked of them. I'm worried about what we eat, how we're managing animals, how we're managing water. You know, the things you can't change, the degradation of the soil.
And that's what I'm right, Jeanette, but it goes beyond that, doesn't it? Because 95% of the food in supermarkets is actually toxic for different reasons in every case, and we're not educating people on health at all.
Yeah. I mean, how have we got a world where people have got malnutrition and they're obese? This is bonkers.
Absolutely.
This is a very interesting discussion, but we've come quite a long way from the question, and we do want to get some other questions in during the course of the programme. But before we move on, I do just want to say, John, at the very top, I did mention that you stopped donating to the Conservative Party because of Rishi Sunak's position on net zero, which you have outlined your take on that. Can I just ask you, are you considering donating to Labour?
Well, let me just give a longer answer to that, but I'll keep it brief, which is that I was never a Tory donor. I was a Tory supporter because I believed their policies were the best for Britain, the best for everybody, not for me as a rich person, but for everybody and the working class people. And I mainly donated because I thought Corbyn and McDonnell would have been a complete and utter disaster. And
now, Keir Starmer?
And now I've put so many policies to the Conservative Party of how we make Britain great again, that we may put the great back into Great Britain, drive the GDP, drive the wealth for people. I've met with Keir Starmer and he is more receptive to my ideas than the Tory Party. Will that mean I donate? I can't answer that, but what I can tell you... No, not yet. No, but what I can say is that any party that makes Britain great by having the right policies, and I've got the right policies written down there, any party that does what I think will make Britain great again...
There we go.
That's a bit of a worry.
We've got it.
Well, I'm prepared to be Parliament, on those theories.
We've got
I'll donate to.
Let's move on now to our next, which comes from Theo. Hello, Theo.
Hello. Do you think that Elgin Marbles belong to Greece or the UK?
John Caudwell.
The UK. And the reason being, although you could debate it all day long, as we're doing sort of now, but, you know, if you tried to unravel everything that's happened in history and return items or countries to the rightful original place, goodness knows what had happened to the world. It'd be an impossible world. So why are we debating just one item out of millions and thinking of returning it to Greece?
Because this has been going on since the 1830s. The Greeks aren't happy about it. They never were. And they're not happy about it now. So we could make a gesture, couldn't we?
But it would require a change in the law, wouldn't it?
I like your
just to be clear.
solution of sending them some sort of artefacts over on a temporary basis and share them. But
we could share them.
They were legitimately acquired, as I understand it, by Elgin from the Ottoman Empire. Now, the Ottoman Empire were the invaders, of course, but that's happened all over the world. You know, everybody's done terrible things. And
but that
most
doesn't make it all right.
We can't make right. But if we stripped everything out that has been acquired over the last 300 or 400 years, there'd probably be nothing left in the museums.
Okay.
Okay. Let's move to our next. It comes from Graham Sedgley. Hello, Graham.
Hello. Will my children ever be able to buy homes in Staffordshire?
John, you actually do quite a lot of work, I think, in the property market, but I would think it's fair to say at the high end of the property market. So you're talking exclusive kind of luxury properties. How is that going to help Graham's children buy a house?
Well, that won't help Graham's children buy a house, but Graham's children will be able to buy a house. And we're in a situation at the moment, and there's always been a percentage of the population that can't get onto the property ladder. That's always been. At the moment, it's extraordinarily out of balance. And the reason it's out of balance is because inflation has driven prices of contractors up dramatically. So house building prices have gone through the roof, and at the same time, people's ability to pay has dropped through the floor because of high interest rates that in some cases have over doubled people's mortgage payments, and people are suffering enormously, but as a consequence, they can't afford to buy the new houses, so the builders cannot afford to build them. So we're in a really catch-2. But I've been condemning the Bank of England now for 12 months because there was no need whatsoever to increase interest rates as they did. Inflation predominantly was caused by other factors, not people going out and spending fortunes on goods. And they didn't need to do it, but if they were going to do it, they should have done it short and sharp, and they should have been dropping interest rates already because inflation was going to come down regardless.
But there was a housing problem before, wasn't there? There was a housing shortage before that.
There always will be, because for the reason the panel have already said, shortage of land and so on, but it's now exacerbated by the imbalance between building costs and what people can actually afford to pay.
But it's not just building costs, John, is it? Because we all started out with nothing and we could all buy somewhere quite easily when we were young. We weren't struggling, and if we couldn't buy somewhere, we could rent somewhere. That was the truth of our generation, and nobody even thought about it. You weren't worrying, queuing round the block and thinking of how it bid people.
Well, that may apply to you, Jeanette, but I was very worried about it, and I borrowed some money from some neighbours to get on my first property.
No, but we had a chance. We were able to buy in a way that
it was
a
real struggle
can't.
for me. It was a real struggle for me, and lots of my friends. I came from the back streets of Stoke-on-Trent. I had.
No, I don't want to get personal about this. I'm saying that generationally, it has changed hugely.
Well,
and it's not just to do with building costs.
It now is a really serious problem that we can agree on. It's a really serious problem.
But I did want to get to this last question because we had a lot of questions on this from the audience here in Lichfield. And this comes from Russ Bragger. Hello, Russ.
Hello. The question is, after the cancellation of HS2 Phase 2, we'll have a high-speed rail from a village close to Lichfield to Old Oak Common. Why can't the UK deliver any big infrastructure schemes?
Russ, thank you for your question. So, HS2, of course, the northern leg of the HS Rail project, was cancelled by Rishi Sunak at the Conservative Party conference. This is one of the areas in Lichfield, for people that don't know, that has been affected quite substantially by the work that's already taken place regarding HS2. Some of that work is going to continue, exactly as Russ says. It's going to link that HS2 line with the West Coast Main Line near to Lichfield here. So Russ asks, why can't the UK deliver big infrastructure schemes? John Caudwell.
Well, I can only agree with the comment abomination because, it's very difficult with any build projects to keep them on time and on price. That is almost impossible because there's always unforeseens, but you build those unforeseens in. For HS2 to be 3 or 4 times over budget and extended beyond in timescale seems absolutely impossible for me to comprehend. It smacks of enormous incompetence throughout.
Hannah, we are out of time. Thank you so much for your contributions to the panel. Thank you so much to my audience, and thank you at home for listening.